It's Thursday, November 28th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, we are talking politics with an MHA panel. Tax breaks, tariffs, and top news stories that impact you. And we will open the phone lines and ask, what would improve your quality of life in this province? What would you like political parties to know? So the phone lines will be open shortly. I'll let you know. Texts and emails are open now. So if you want to get in with some of those thoughts, right, on what you would like politicians or political parties to know, or what would improve your quality of life in this province, emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Text line 709-327-8206. First, though, a general chat about some of those top stories I mentioned. So joining me here in the studio, leader of the opposition PC member of Stephenville Port-au-Port, Tony Wakeham, third-party leader and NDP member for St. John Centre, Jim Dinn, and Justice Minister and Liberal member for Virginia Waters Pleasantville, Bernard Davis. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Tariffs. Incoming U.S. President Donald, I don't know if you heard about this. It's been in the news all week, right? So the incoming president, Donald Trump, threatening 25% tariffs on unimported goods, Canada, Mexico. The CBC story says, here's the headline from CBC Business. Trump's tariffs would crush Canada's economy. Why some industry leaders are calling his bluff. Oil, energy, and autos would bear the brunt of tariffs if they're implemented at all. So the if there's doing, lifting up some stuff. Do we think this is bluster? Or like, where are you at with this? Mr. Wakeham, go with you first.
Well, for me, I don't think we can. I don't think we can assume it's bluster.
Yeah, don't bet on bluster.
Right. I think we take this very, very seriously. The economy in Newfoundland and Labrador depends significantly on export to the United States market. When we think of our fishing industry and the impact that would have on rural Newfoundland and Labrador and on our economy, there's over $1 billion a year in dollars that come in to our province as a result of our fishery. I always call it a renewable mega project because it brings in new money every year. And so the fact that could be impacted by this particular tariffs, the same with our oil industry, the same with our lumber, the same with mining. There's so many industries that we rely on. So we need to take this very seriously, and we need to make sure that as a country we deal with this in a serious manner, and let's get this resolved, if possible, before the deadlines that have been suggested by the president actually come in place. I think, there's an opportunity for the Prime Minister and the premiers met yesterday to take this, and now let's get ahead of it.
Right.
Let's not wait.
Anyone else in this? So apparently the premiers seem to be all on the same page, according to news reporting from the meeting with the Prime Minister last night, including Premier Andrew Furey. Like any other thoughts?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's I couldn't agree more with MHA Wakeham. I think it's an all hands on deck approach. Yeah. There's a Team Canada approach that's already started very quickly out of the gate based on President-elect Trump's decree. Mm-hmm. We've started as well in Newfoundland and Labrador as a Newfoundland and Labrador approach. We've got to make sure the Premier and Minister of Finance brought in a group of key stakeholders yesterday, meetings with them to talk about the industry. I mean, it's not lost on us how impactful those tariffs would be. The fishing industry with 60 to 70 to 80% of the products going to the United States market. I mean, that's an amazing amount of problems. And 50% of our oil industry, or 50% of our oil, goes to the U.S. market. That's going to be devastating for the people that we all represent around this table. But, it's going to be devastating for the individuals on the other side of that tariff as well.
Mr. D?
I'm looking at it from a negotiations point of view, and this is what this is. And as a former union leader, we're used to dealing with bullies sometimes that hold all the cards. Simple as that. So I think certainly the Premier is right to be at the table and say and make sure that Newfoundland interests are not traded off for other interests. Within our fishery is impacted. I think it's important to be there.
Yeah, get that message to Ottawa, right?
Very
yeah, sure.
clear.
Okay.
But I think it's important for unity. Yet we have some premiers already sort of siding with Trump. We need to tighten up our borders and so on and so forth. You hear the panic words, the catastrophic, the hyperbole, which sort of indicates we're arguing out of fear instead of strength, because this is going to impact American citizens more so and undermine what Trump wants. He's a bully. Yeah. Simple as put it that. But we also need to look at our allies, to figure out where our allies are, not just within the country, but also Mexico. Mm-hmm. In the minute we start carving off our interests versus their interests, one problem, we're lost. Mm. And I think it's if I were Trump today, he'd be listening to this. He's achieved what he wants. It's a sense of panic. You can hear it, and I think we need to stop with the fear in our own dialogue and talk about the fact that we are a strong country, that we are united, that we have allies outside that we can rely on, and let's meet this gentleman with this president with strength. He's not even in office yet, and he's already setting the agenda. So from my point of view is it's good to be concerned. It's good to have a strategy. It's important to have that strategy. But let's make sure that we're talking about, that this is a two-way street, President. You're not in yet, but this is going to hurt you as well. So,
sure.
And rely on that, right?
And some of this could be he could be trying to, like you said, set up negotiations. It might be about NATO spending for the 2% or something. There's lots that can be talked about. But if they do bring these in, as like folks who are MHAs here, part of the government, what do we do here?
Well, that's the whole point. And to Jim's point, I don't think it's about pressing a panic button.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the significant impacts that any tariff would have on the export of products from Newfoundland and Labrador into the United States. And it doesn't matter what we think of Trump or don't think of Trump. Yeah. It's about the tariff. We have to make sure that tariffs are not imposed on the goods and services, the products that we produce here in Newfoundland and Labrador or ship to the United States. So how do we ensure that? And that means that we need partners like the federal government and the premiers, the rest of Canada, to say, let's focus in on that particular issue. So focus on the issue, not the individual. Mm. Let's focus on that, and let's make sure that we turn around and say the concerns that are being raised, how do we address them as a country? How does the Prime Minister address them with the President? And let's get this dealt with long before he even becomes President. We don't need to wait.
Sworn in, yeah. Okay.
Canada has a position of strength on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
I think people discount sometimes the fact that the sheer population difference between the U.S. and Canada. But I mean, we have the products that are desired by
more than
residents.
all of the EU.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why we're in a position of strength, and I would agree that's why we're taking the position of strength we have and putting a Team Canada approach and a Team Newfoundland and Labrador approach in, because I think we do need everybody to be speaking together to say this is we need no tariffs, we need free trade to be reign true here between our countries that have had a great relationship for thousands or hundreds of years, and we want to make sure that is for the betterment of the industries we represent in our province, and make sure those industries are successful. I mean, this would be devastating for industries. We think by putting them at the table, working together, so we're all singing from the same hymn book, making sure that message is getting to the suppliers that we sell to or the industries we sell to, and in turn, the individuals that purchase those products in the United States as well. Because those individuals are going to put pressure as well on an administration that is not in yet, but is directing policy and setting a negotiation position. I believe that's what's occurring here, but we can't bet on the fact that this is just rhetoric and bluster. We've got to do the hard work and with each other at the table to make sure we've got the best and strongest position, both from federation and from the province.
despite the fact that the when it comes to illegal or the border crossings and fentanyl, even though in Canada it's a significantly less of a threat, the incoming president has already wrung some concessions or some appeasement issues, and that's a headline I saw today. Canada, in an attempt to appease Trump, where we're going to commit to more tighten the border and so on and so forth. And I'm not arguing against tightening the borders, but it seems that he's not even in that position, and we've already started to look at this in terms of appeasement. No, I've got to wonder then, what if this is his opening salvo and he's not president yet? Where does it stop? At some point, I think we've got to, really got to stand up to him in some way and say, I guess it's going to come. Tariffs are a double-edged sword. It may affect us, but it's going to affect the people in the who are depending on cheap seafood in their way, or oil, or so on and so forth. So to me, it comes down to I think it really bothers me when I hear different premiers out there, sort of having a slightly different view. It does not do Canada's position of strength. There's got to be unity, whatever our political differences. There's got to be some unity on this, and not. I'm not going to, as what Mark Twain said. I've had a lot of worries in my life, many of which never happened. Yeah. So I'm not being complacent, but let's keep calm, keep our powder dry.
Keep calm, get on the same page, carry on, see what happens. All right, moving on to the next topic here. Yes, on yesterday's show. I asked, are we doing enough to protect children of vulnerable people in this province? I had a couple guests in, and essentially the answer was no. So I had Lynn Moore, a lawyer who works almost exclusively in the area of sexual abuse litigation. You all know who Lynn Moore is. And same with Angela Cronkwell, executive director of Thrive, an organization that works to help and support vulnerable people. The jumping off point for the conversation was the massive sexual exploitation case in the news that happened in St. John's, right? 82-year-old former taxi driver Bruce Escott at the center of this case pleaded guilty to 7 charges last week. Escott lived in a trailer by the airport in St. John's, just down the street from his co-accused Tony Humby. Humby, who was 64, has pleaded not guilty, scheduled for trial in March. Escott back in court January 31st for sentencing submissions. That'll probably come at a later date anyways. That's the little nutshell of the issue. You've all talked about it in the House of Assembly. I actually played some of that tape yesterday from the 20th. All of that to say, my question for you three is, when it comes to existing child protection legislation, have you looked at it?
Good. Let me go first.
Sure.
And I did listen to your broadcast yesterday, and the subject of in my opinion, there were 2 issues here. One was the issue of what has happened, and I have been very clear from the beginning that we need a full investigation into what happened, and that would include the investigation of the department. Investigation of justice and investigation of group homes, because that's part of the challenge, understanding how something happened, why it happened, and how do we move forward. On the legislation piece, do not disagree that we have to look at what can we do now. Because while I talk about a full investigation, if there are things that can be changed legislatively to further protect children in care now, then we ought to be doing it. Now, I can't tell you what that exactly looks like. I don't have a legal background or how it would work. But to me, it's twofold. One, we got to make sure we get it right. But I'm deeply concerned that things have happened, and we don't know why. And until we know why, it's very difficult to understand how we could fix it. I know there are systemic issues. When you have a department that has over 100 vacancies in social workers, for example, is that part of the problem? So there are things that we ought to be reviewing. I don't think it's good enough, though, just to be reviewing the department alone.
Now, before I go to my other 2 guests here, I've got a clip, and this is for context for you listeners and for everyone here sitting with me now, in case my other guest did not catch the show yesterday. Here is lawyer Lynn Moore. The first clip, please.
I cannot express how disturbing it is that the government has changed the definition of a child in need of protection, and pedophiles who are not parents are not the subject of child protection's mandate. Like, that's not, they could easily say, not my problem. And it should be their problem.
Why do you think they did that?
Because they had a review in 2008 which said they were doing a poor job, and they said to themselves, well, what do we do now? We're not meeting the needs that we have out there, so are we going to expand what we do? Are we going to infuse resources? Are we going to fundamentally change the system? Or are we going to say, yeah, no, not our business. We'll just reduce what we do. We'll take out prevention. We'll stop being worried about children who are the victims of pedophiles, and we'll just do less because we're doing a really bad job of everything, so we'll do less. That's what they decided.
So lawyer Lynn Moore, they're talking about an 2008 review, a 2010 during the PC government change in legislation, but then we've had Liberal government since. It might be new to some people, but I'm sure that folks within the bureaucracy would know about this. Minister, what are your thoughts on that?
So let me be first clear. The number one priority of any government is the protection of our children. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the House of Assembly would agree with that. Every bureaucrat in whichever department across the government we're working, it's our number one priority. Obviously, this direct reference that you made earlier is before the court, so I can't speak about it directly, those two individuals.
No, and I don't want to talk about that.
But it's obviously the Minister of Children, Seniors and Social Development has talked about this in the House of Assembly before, that they're always looking at the legislation to make improvements that can be made. I can't speak directly to what improvements they're looking at right now currently, but I know that they're always making tweaks to legislation for the betterment of new information, either jurisdictionally across the country or things that come forward from advocates like Lynn and Angela. I mean, Angela is on the front line of a lot of these things each and every day, and they're great people.
If they're always looking at ways legislation can be tweaked, and you've had someone like Lynn Moore shouting this for years, why hasn't there been a look into under the hood of the legislation to change it? This is something that's been outlined that is not about looking into cases now. This is something that's been outlined for a long time. Why hasn't that been part of a caucus discussion or a discussion around the cabinet table?
So as Minister of Justice, we're always looking at individuals that people make a accusation or a complaint about, and they're investigated or looked into, and depending upon individuals coming forward and the investigation that looks into those particular individuals, that's how we handle that particular type of case, I guess, those issues that come forward. With respect to the children in care that are put into situations like group homes and things like that, there's significant policies that are put in place to protect individuals. And I'm not saying that nefarious people will try to get around any changes you make, whether they be legislative or policy. And we've got to be nimble enough to try to move on some of those things when we see the errors. And there will undoubtedly, when the investigation is finished into this, there will be people looking at not only the department
but you don't need to wait for the investigation to be finished. I mean, there's stuff that is known right now. This is something that could be talked about right now for a bigger issue than one. This goes back to Mount Cashel. This goes back to any case of sexual exploitation in this province. You've got a lawyer saying, wait, they made it just the parents. When it comes to a child in need of protection in 2010, that should be expanded back out so it could be the figure skating coach, the volleyball coach, the uncle down the road, or you name it. And if those conversations aren't happening now, I still wonder why not. Well,
just to take on that point that you made, then individuals that are in those areas that you just highlighted, your figure skating coach, your baseball coach, your soccer coaches, those individuals, based on the organizations they're part of, have to provide vulnerable sector screens that are done by RNC or RCMP or other agencies that would go into the backgrounds to see what kind of individuals they are, if there's been any accusations made against them, and then they wouldn't get a clean certificate of conduct.
But obviously that's not working though, right?
That's correct. In some cases it hasn't worked. There's individuals that in our school system, and sometimes they get through those cracks. And I'm not sitting here saying that it's a perfect situation. I'm not, by no stretch. But there's things that we need to make improvements on, and I know the Minister of Children, Seniors and Social Development is working on those with his department to make changes and make the legislation stronger to protect those young people that are in our care.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Din.
You know, listening to Lynn, and she talked about how basically changing the parameters of the definition. So it was
a pulling back.
Pulling back.
How should you kind of describe it? Right?
So I guess we could increase the pass rate in a school system by lowering the pass mark, right? Mm-hmm. And so and lower the bar. So I guess the frustration I speak to, because I'm listening to this, and as an educator, policies are great. Great to talk about policies, great to talk about legislation, but it comes down to the resources to enforce that policy or to put it in place. Safe and caring schools policy is one example. Lots of good stuff in there, but I can tell you in terms of the in terms of how it's going to be implemented is a whole other realm. The shortage of social workers, is that the case? Is this a case of a policy not having the manpower, the resources that are needed to implement it? I can tell you, only at the beginning of this year, when it came to finding resources for EAL students, nope, not there. So here, and I guess I'm speaking from frustration here as a former teacher, and dealing with some of the issues even right now in my role as an MHA. I think it still comes down to the resourcing piece. I definitely would like to see an independent, a fully independent inquiry into this. But I will tell you if there are recommendations that come out of this, and that's where it ends. We got another report that's shelved, and you and I are talking, and the three of us are talking about this in 2 years' time. We failed. So it comes down to maybe, like what Lynn said, expanding that as well, and putting the resources there if we want to make sure. I'd have to ask, why are children not safe in care? What is the fundamental issue there? What are the supports for families to deal with this? So why are they in care in the first? Anyway, I just find that I hear this from government at time, no matter what political stripe, about policies. We put policies in place, and in the end of it, policies aren't written in paper or printed on if the resources aren't there to help schools or to help families and the organizations out there to ensure the safety of children and other vulnerable individuals.
Go for it.
I just want to clarify one statement that the MHA just made. The children, I don't want people to assume that children in care are not safe. There's the assumption then is that no children in our care are safe. That's not true.
Okay.
Children are safe in our care. There is issues that come up from time to time, like has happened in this situation. And I know the department is working very hard to fix any of the issues that can be made improvements on to ensure that doesn't happen ever again.
I've got one other clip to play, so it's one of two. So this is 2 of 2 now. And this is, yesterday on the show, I mentioned Georgina's Law, Bill S-49. Would give Canada 2 years to create a strategy and require the government of the time to update all houses of parliament on what actions have been taken to stop intimate partner violence every 2 years. The bill's name refers to Georgina McGraw of Branch, an advocate who drew upon her own painful experiences to develop a plan for a national strategy and who took her ideas to Conservative Senator Fabian Manning. So what I asked yesterday was, if you look at Georgina's Law, but then we look at child protection, is there something there to be done for legislation around child protection in this province? And here's what Lynn Moore had to say about that.
The beauty of Georgina's Law, and God bless Georgina McGraw for working on this and getting it done. The beauty of it is that it makes the House report on something. It makes them come up with a plan. It makes them focus. And if we could have the same kind of thing for child protection, I think that we would be years ahead. Instead of bureaucrats running around trying to develop new policies about how to protect children and how to regulate social workers, if we could really focus on the problem, which is trauma and poverty. If we could work towards those solutions, we would see a new generation which is not raised in trauma. we have a lot of work to do with the folks that are out there now who have been raised in trauma. And the government, if you have been raised as a person in care by the child protection system and you have children, then those children are at risk by virtue of the fact that the province raised you. So that really tells you that the system is a complete failure when being raised by the system makes you at risk as a parent. So we need a strategy, we need a plan to go forward, and something like this for child protection would be wonderful.
Lawyer Lynn Moore there from the show yesterday. I'm replaying a clip for it because you're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh, and we're opening the phone lines now too. We're asking what would improve your quality of life in this province? What would you like political parties to know? 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Texts 709-327-8206. Here with me in the studio, Justice Minister, Liberal member for Virginia Waters Pleasantville, Bernard Davis, Leader of the Opposition and PC member of Stephenville, Port-au-Port, Tony Wakeham, third-party leader and NDP member for St. John's Centre, Jim Dinn. Any thoughts on that clip? Go for it.
Poverty.
Trauma and poverty is what she said.
Isn't
that a Newfoundland and Labrador story? If we look at a lot of the issues that we face today, trauma and poverty are through lines through a lot of them.
So I'll come back to that. But the opening, she's talking about reporting to the House. I will tell you that we, I know in the opposition side, we have asked for a number of cases of committees to have it report to the House, steadfast stonewalling. But I think that's the first thing. Keep it transparent and answerable to the House of Assembly. As for poverty, we've been very clear about when it comes to whether it's affordable housing, a strategy for that, when it comes to the health care, when it comes to issues like removing the HST of home heating. There's a way of reducing poverty, a guaranteed basic income, Adam. The other issue, I guess, too, related to this is, and I remember this from speaking to members of Irish Curb House, that there are women, more and more women who are staying in abusive relationships because there is no safe haven for them to go. There is no housing. So
there's no room at shelters. And I will say this is 16 days of activism right now against gender-based violence. We are day 3 or 4 on it. Right, started on Monday. Okay.
So it's heartbreaking when people come to you, and it's increased in the last few years. I would say between COVID and the cost of living and so on and so forth. So that shouldn't be the case. If nothing else, there should be maybe supports for the family as well. That you can, if there's a way of counseling to address it. But for God's sake, when someone comes to you, and you as an organization whose sole responsibility is to protect those who are vulnerable and those fleeing family or intimate partner violence or family violence, there should be a place for them to go. But that was the first indication to me that there was of trouble a few years ago when we were dealing with this. So it comes down to deeply affordable housing. Yet at the same time, this government has been selling off Newfoundland and Labrador housing units. So at some point, and that's in my district, at some point there's got to be something.
Livingston Street, right?
There's got to be something here to address those issues. If we want to solve the problem, it's not about more policing. It's about addressing the social determinants of health that were laid out in the health accord. I don't know how many times we have to say that.
Minister Davis.
Yeah. So thank you, Adam. I agree. The social determinants of health are important. That's why we did the health accord. That's why we're working towards it. It's not a document that can be done in a year. If it could be done in a year, it would already have been done by every party in this province before. It's not easy. It's challenging. So that's why it takes time. We've seen some progress in that. Talking about affordable housing, we've made some great gains in affordable housing. I think there's some 3,000 units that are in process now throughout the province, based on some of the business case that's been working through Minister Abbott's file. We understand that affordable housing and the social determinants are very interlinked with mental health and addictions. That's why we put that as its own ministry with Minister Abbott. We've created the all-party committee for basic income, of which both myself and Jim are part of.
When will we hear more on that, by the way? Because 2022, it came out in the Health Accord. This has been created. I'm just curious, do we know when we're going to hear more on it?
Well, I don't want to. I think it will be in the next little while. It's not. We're getting closer to the end. Than
something's
we are,
coming. Okay.
Yes, we're getting closer to the end of that process, and we've met with a significant amount of individuals, key stakeholders, and we understand that lifting every person up in Newfoundland. Starting at our most vulnerable is going to lift us all up as a province. So we're going to continue to work on that. Putting investments into, things like, reducing the chance of doubling electricity rates. That would have been challenging. Yeah. We put some money into that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, yes, we can go on through the spend. The spending is happening. There's, as you folks say, investments are happening. Mr. Wakeham, your thoughts?
Well, let me start off by saying that this province had a poverty reduction strategy
in the Williams government
that was considered to be one of the best in the country. And that's not me saying that. That's people across the country.
I've done reporting. Can I ask you a quick question on that?
Yeah.
Just about it? And yes, and like I've talked to food and security experts, and they say that too, right? They say that was a gold standard. But one of the things that happened during the Williams government at the time was social assistance was pegged to inflation. Is that something you would bring back in?
Well, again, that's part of what you need to do. Adam, what I wanted to say was, before I get into that, was that the Liberal government abandoned that poverty reduction strategy, eliminated it. And they have not been able to introduce a new poverty reduction strategy. We've heard lots of announcements, but announcements aren't strategy. Strategy takes time. It takes a process to develop. And that's been one of the challenges that we hear all the time across Newfoundland and Labrador, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's cost of living. All of these issues can be related back, but you don't fix problems through announcements. You fix them through planning and detailed planning. And to your point, I have called for a review of every single program that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador currently offers. And that's something I'm committed to doing. And when I talk about that, what I mean is when we look at thresholds, for example, they haven't changed in 10 years. So the minimum threshold for somebody, eligibility, is still at that level as it was 10 years ago. But the costs have gone up significantly. So the programs are there, but we're leaving too many people behind.
So it's like, how are we doing with them?
Right.
Let's go to the phone lines. And as we go to folks, if you're in the queue, we'll keep things short for a question, and the questions that we're putting out there is, what would improve your quality of life in this province, or what would you like political parties to know? 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Sue Rose is on the line. Hi, Sue.
Hi. I had to call in because obviously, as a human rights advocate and an educator myself, I just want to point out that when we talk about why kids end up where they do, I totally agree with everything Lynn Moore said. And the one thing we're missing is we do not have safe and caring schools in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm continuously hearing from parents, and I most recently yesterday, a mother from Cornerbrook who has a son that was diagnosed with autism in grade 3. Her and her husband were told that if they want programming that are specific for their child, for them to hire their own experts, because there are none. And I don't mean to be so critical, because as an educator, I know what it's like in the classroom. I know what it's like. I spent 22 years in the classroom. But again, we had a momentum going with the Conservative government. Minister Clyde Jackman used to come to some of our workshops, and we were doing amazing work. And one government gets in, and then all of a sudden everything goes out the window, and we continuously do these reports. Like Jim was saying, we're doing reports all the time. We know the issues. If we're going to why did we lose over 200 young teachers in the past 4 years in our education system in this province? Why do we have one of the highest dropout rates in the country in this province? The community that I'm in, on the Bacaloo Trail, we have four kids that are not in school. They haven't been in school for a long time because they're ADHD, and there are just no programs. If you don't have qualified people in your classrooms, if you don't have social workers to address the kids that are coming from violent homes beginning in preschool, then we're going to create nothing but chaos. We wonder why there's an issue in Harbour Grace. We've had 2 murders in the past 4 years. We've got huge issues in our schools here. So I can't emphasize enough. Enough is enough. And Minister Davis, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We spent $1.5 million rolling out programs and training principals, vice principals, guidance counselors on how to create safe and caring schools for the 2S LGBT community. The Liberal government gets in and the white ball rolls it out, and it completely excludes this initiative. So we wonder why we're dealing with teachers that are leaving.
So we've got we've got young people not in school. Yeah, just good. Wrap it up, and then I'll put it to the guests.
Well,
thanks, Sue.
Can we provide services for kids in primary and elementary? Because if we provide the right resources and understand the difference between autism, ADHD, and the differences that are required in the classrooms to help these children, where every kid feels comfortable in school, we will have a better society. So when are we ever going to start that? Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sue. Sue Rose there calling. Right. So education. And one of the things that stood out for me from what Sue was saying, and I'll let you, 3 of you react here now, social workers in school, right? We don't have them. Is this not a thing we should have is, I guess, my question, and as well as Sue's. But any general reaction to what she was saying and also to the social worker point?
I know when I was president, we were looking at at that role of it, because if you look at the child in front of you, is not just usually the child's family is probably getting sometimes services from whether it's justice, social service, CSSD, housing, you name it. So there's the piece where teachers are dealing with the child and in the school, but there's also the family aspect. So having social workers there that to bridge that would be significant. Occupational therapists in the school sometimes. I think we're the only jurisdiction that doesn't have OTs in the school system. Sometimes just the environment can be a huge assistance. The other part she talked about is it comes down to the resources, about implementing policies. And again, I go back to this. Back in 2016 budget, we brought in and implemented full-day kindergarten. No problem with that. No issue with that, Adam. But the Liberal government at the time took those resources from the rest of the system, grade 1 to 12, the 146, they increased class size. I can tell you, I've been harping on this, and at primary level, when you've got classes up to 25 sometime or more, and if you've got children who are, whether they're language barriers, educational deficits, social, emotional issues, if you're, it's not helping the kids that are in the system. Hence, we had the reports of school violence. I don't know how many times we have to talk about this, but promote this. It was an issue when I was president. It's still an issue.
So you're saying don't take away from another part of the system to fix one part of the system. Put more into the system.
Put the resources into it. We're not dealing with widgets.
Yeah.
Okay. We're dealing with people.
Sure.
Adam, a couple of points.
Yeah.
One, we use the word inclusive, but inclusive cannot be just a word. It has to be an action. And unfortunately, for too many children in our school system, it's not. And when Sue talked about the people in the system knowing what the issues are, I agree 100%, because I have continuously said, if you want to know how to fix the system or how to make it better, go talk to the people that work at it, and whether that's education or health. And so that's part of the problem. We ought to be out. We don't need to be doing big reports all the time, as Jim alluded to earlier, that sit on desks somewhere that never get implemented. We ought to be out making sure that we're meeting the needs. And let's think about education not as a cost, but as an investment. And that's what needs to be happening here.
Do you have faith in the ongoing education accord that we're waiting for or not?
I think we cannot afford to wait.
Okay.
For the education accord.
I mean, we're supposed to get, we're talking next month type of a thing, right?
We have waited so long. It's been 9 years, and our education system has not gotten better.
Okay.
It has not gotten better. This year, for example, do we need an education accord to make sure that we hire student assistants before school year starts instead of a month after it starts? We don't need an education accord to tell us that. So those are the kind of things. I think there's lots of things that we ought to be doing better. And when it comes to looking after children, it's not one size fits all either. They all have different needs, and it's about identifying those needs and finding ways to help.
Minister James.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Sue, for the great question, and thank you for your service as an educator. I see firsthand in my own district how hard the teachers work in a challenging situation. So thank you to those teachers. It's, any resources that we can put in, whether that's, I like the idea of an education accord. I think it's similar to what we've done with the health accord, which sets a roadmap, a strong plan on how we're going to improve the educational outcomes. Because we all want our students to be the best educated, safe schools. We all want violence out of schools. That's our primary focus, is to try to do that, and making sure that we put the investments in the right spot. And we've made choices to fix things that people highlight to us as a problem, whether that's putting extra IRTs, whether that's making sure. And I'm not saying that it's fully implemented yet, but I know there's going to be more changes coming with respect to the education system. Minister Howell is focused on that, as well as, I think making the change of bringing the school board in to add some synergies within the department from a program perspective is going to make betterments in the system. But understanding that our teachers are working very hard in a very complex system with respect to very complex needs of children, and having those wraparound services like the health accord that we're doing, that's going to help with wraparound services, because many of the concerns that are happening at schools, at least I hear from my teachers and my principals, is, the issues that, not having a family doctor, or not having, the ability to see a psychologist or a counselor.
Yeah, school counselor.
Those are important things that, when the health accord gets fully implemented, they're going to help in the school system as well.
But why not just do that now? Like, why not have social workers in schools now? Why not have you're saying, well, the wraparound services are needed. I know it's like doctors, it can be complicated, but for what is possible, why not do it right now?
But we're trying to do that right now.
To do it.
Yeah, but they don't. But people don't grow on trees. Remember, we can't recruit a social worker that are highly skilled. We have to recruit them.
But you haven't put out the ad for it, though, right? So, for example, if you look at the provincial job board right now, there's an ad for the Boston job for trade in Boston. There's no ad for social workers in schools. There's
ads for school people in schools, not necessarily a social worker. We have social workers that are working within the education system. Mm-hmm. We do, and those jobs, when they become vacant, we try to fill them as quick as we possibly can. Okay. We've seen improvements in recruitment, whether it be from doctors or nurses. We've seen improvements. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. We're going to be continually working on trying to find ways we can recruit. We need the best and brightest of our teachers to want to be happy in the system and work. And I know that they have challenges. We're trying to meet those challenges as best we can in a situation that is complex. And we're committed to trying to fix that. I know I tell my teachers to voice those concerns to me, regardless of coming through the union or anybody. Just tell me, and I have no problem bringing them forward for them as well.
We've had Patrick Pendergast waiting on the line for a little bit now. Patrick, thanks for calling. I believe you want to talk about the carbon tax and climate change.
Yes, that's right. I do. I think that the warming environment is a very serious issue for us in this province and in the country and in the world. And I don't see us paying enough attention to it. And I think that the carbon tax is a great system to encourage people not to produce the greenhouse gases. Yeah. I think it's a great system. It puts a price on carbon. The more people use, the more they're going to pay, and it also gives a rebate back to people. So I don't understand why we're not supporting that, why we're not getting behind that, To me, it's like we are a bunch of lemmings and we're going along and we're going to fall off the cliff, and those cliffs are approaching. When all of the ice in the Arctic goes, or most of it, it heats up the planet. The permafrost is going to come out of the ground, produce a lot more carbon. These are drop-off points, and we're getting very close to them. And I just heard a story on the radio this morning about researchers have identified that when we go over the 1.5, which I believe we just did this year, the snow crab off our coast are going to be affected. The cod are going to be affected. The warming waters are affecting our fishery, and there are many things in the climate that are affecting us. And I think we really have to sit up and pay attention, and we have to get our own house in order. We're not the biggest polluters in the world, but we have to get our own house in order and then work with others in the world, and we have to get this thing under control.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Patrick. I appreciate that. And and per capita, we're hitting well above when it comes to pollutants. So thank you very much. I appreciate your call. Thoughts on carbon tax, climate change?
Well, I'm on record as being opposed to carbon tax, and I'll tell Patrick why. Yeah. We certainly believe that we have to do more about climate change and the impacts that it's having all over Newfoundland and Labrador, and indeed our country. Mm-hmm. No one will dispute that. We need to do more. But I firmly believe in technology, not taxation. I would argue that Newfoundland and Labrador has paid more its fair share to make this country greener per capita than any other province in Canada. Because we often talk about, when we think about the Upper Churchill and the power that provides, electrical power that provides. When we think about Muskrat Falls, we always talk about the high cost of it. But that's right now producing electricity and keeping the lights on in this studio and in many homes across the province, and also helping Nova Scotia reduce its carbon footprint by elimination of coal. So I think there's a lot more could be done on that. And I have yet to see any report that says the carbon tax has actually reduced Canada's carbon footprint. Now, what I can tell you... No,
economists say it does work, but yes, I understand your point there.
We haven't
seen the report yet.
Right. Yeah. But I tell you, it has made a significant impact on people's pocketbooks, especially here in Newfoundland and Labrador. We rely on the transportation to provide us with many of the goods and services we need. And all of those get impacted by this carbon tax. And then we add on the fact that, people out there do not have an alternate mode of transportation. So even if they wanted to reduce their carbon footprint by not going in their cars as often, they have no options.
We don't have adequate public transit in Newfoundland.
Exactly.
And there could be, obviously there's a discussion within St. John's and Corner Brook and Happy Valley Goose Bay, depending on public transit and to what extent it actually helps people.
Right. So those are the things that, concern me. And then when I hear of, they're giving it back. Well, I would argue if you're giving it back, why are you collecting it? And I think about the hundreds of millions that they're spending federally to collect it by people who are employed to collect the carbon tax, and then how many more are paid to give it back?
Now, for the folks who don't drive, I think there will be a question later on for folks who are receiving the carbon tax, and when they stop receiving it down the road, what that will mean for their bottom line.
Right. But I would think that if there was the carbon tax wasn't there, maybe their cost of food that they buy at the grocery store may not be as much. Maybe some of the other products they take. So it's not just about, quote, driving an automobile. Yeah. I think it has significant more impacts, and I think we ought to be using technology.
Anyone else on this? Go for it.
Yeah, as a former environment minister, I fully understand, the plight of what we're facing as a global community. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, one of our challenges that we face is a very small population and a very big geography. And some of the reasons why carbon tax as a measure can work in the 905 and the 514, but not work in 709 in Newfoundland and Labrador is because of those geographic problems we have. When it was federally mandated to us to do it, we had a made in Newfoundland and Labrador approach, which carved off things that we were passionate about as a people to protect, whether that be energy, whether that be fish, whether that be infrastructure like heating and things like that. We have no option to change in this case. And the market itself...
We could have kept the Newfoundland and Labrador approach, though, right?
No.
No?
We weren't allowed to keep the Newfoundland. We fought for that.
Yeah.
That was what myself and the Premier were fighting with Minister Guilbeault on and the Prime Minister. Yeah. We couldn't do that. It had to be match the federal backstop. Yeah. They wanted to take away home heating fuel, and we weren't prepared because we had some 40,000 people that heat their homes with oil. And they were going to put a carbon tax on that. That's why we turned and said we weren't in favor of a carbon tax. There's measures that the international community are making anyway, like it's happening because whether it be the war in Ukraine or whatnot, prices have gone up on fuel for that reason. My thoughts at the time as Environment Minister was telling Minister Guilbeault that it was no need, pause it. There's no need to continue on with this. We've already seen the change that comes, as you said. The economists say it works, and we've already seen that change because the world market is dictating that. We don't believe that taxing the people for things that they can't make a choice for, like public transit. We don't have that ability in every part of this province. You can't get that in St. Anthony.
What choice do we have but to support this in the absence of any real plan? And I'm not hearing it. I'm hearing technology. I'm hearing, look, the markets are going to take care of it. But it comes down to, we know that there is a significant cost currently to climate change, whether it's fires, the changing, the weather bombs, you name it. It's significant.
Yeah, it's here. It's just going to get worse.
It's going to have increasing impacts on food. I would say they have. It's having an impact on insurance, whether it's for your home or for your car. That's already having, I think it's 8%. A recent, I think it was a report on CBC indicated that actually the rates or greenhouse gases had declined since it was imposed. The other part of it is that I can tell you a number of people in my district who are doing quite well on the income, on the carbon rebate, significantly, and it's actually probably a bigger help to them than anything else, probably making up for the impact of climate change on food prices and so on and so forth. So it's great to talk about. Every time we have this discussion, we all believe in climate change, but there's always that word "but." The question I think we need to ask is, do you know what climate change means exactly? Because that's the question that needs to be asked here. What does that mean? That's the key question we have now. So you know what? Rightfully so. I'm concerned. I've got grandchildren. What world will be there for them down the road? And that's the key thing that keeps me awake at night as well.
I want to sneak in one getting back to crime protection, and also, I guess in this case, punishment from a theme earlier on in the show. News came out, $150 million of federal revenue for the new HMP. Typically, there comes big announcements and pictures and stuff with $150 million. Do we know what is happening, Minister? I guess I'm looking at you for this. Is there anything in the works with this $150 million from the feds when it comes to an HMP replacement? Because that is still also part of that discussion of safety in this province.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've got about 3 minutes left to the show.
We've made a commitment that we're going to build a new replacement for the corrections facility called HMP. We've made that. We're working towards that. We put RFP out for it. We're moving across that process, and I don't like using a word that drives my colleagues upset in the House of Assembly saying stay tuned, but there is definitely a movement for that. Part of the reason why we haven't announced the $150 million that came from the federal government is because we're still working through that process. Okay. When that process comes, they'll be there with us at the announcement of the HMP replacement facility that I look forward to announcing.
This is a 2025 thing?
Stay tuned.
All right. Last question for everyone. Unless anyone wants to jump into that. We've got less than 2 minutes left. How are we feeling about the next, it's election palooza next year, right? So it's federal, it's provincial, it's municipal. We just saw the election in Nova Scotia. Final thoughts, like 20 seconds each, on where things are at.
I'm hearing from people all over Newfoundland and Labrador that we can do better, we must do better, and I will guarantee them we will do better.
Mr. Dan.
Still get the calls. I think many in the last day or so, again, housing and healthcare are still major issues. And I will say this, despite all the announcements, people are still struggling with affordability in housing in other areas and in healthcare.
Mr. Davis.
Absolutely. Next year is going to be an interesting year from an election standpoint. We've put a lot of things in place. We're not finished by no stretch on things we're going to continue to be doing. We've tried to make improvements where they could be made, and we're going to continue to try to keep the individuals that we all represent, all of us around this table and the 40 of us in the House Assembly, top of mind in any decision we make, and we're going to continue to do that.
Thanks for this. Appreciate you spending your lunch hours with me on the down week. I mean, it's never a down week when you're working. So thank you very much, Bernard Davis, Tony Wickham, Jim Din. Thank you, folks. That is it for today's show. Anytime you have questions for us or comments, the signal at cbc.ca. Call the Signal Live and leave a message, 576-5260. Of course, it's a 709 area code. Tomorrow on the show, we're talking about Memorial University's centennial. They're looking for 100 people whose stories helped build the university and its reputation. If you have thoughts on who some of those hundreds could be or should be, give us a call tomorrow on The Signal.